Hello, I'm Thane Gustafson, and with me today is my colleague Bhushan Bahree, who is Senior Director for Global Oil, and I'm Senior Director for Russian and Caspian Energy. And we're here today to talk about the upcoming program at IHS Energy CERAWeek, which will be in Houston in April. And we thought we might bring you up to date on a few of the secrets that we're going to reveal in Houston at the time of CERAWeek. So Bhushan will be talking in a moment about OPEC, the latest developments in OPEC and the Middle East. And I'll say a few words about the situation in Russia, which is extremely dramatic at the moment. Russia and Saudi Arabia effectively neck and neck as oil producers and as oil exporters. The lead passes, the baton passes from one to the other as they are rivals in this department. But between the two of them, they traditionally make the weather in oil markets. But with one very significant difference, and that is that the Russians have always been price takers, and they have never joined OPEC and have never really cooperated with OPEC, and they've not attempted to influence world oil prices. But right now, they are being influenced by a perfect storm of events. The first one being the sanctions, the second one being the collapse in oil prices. I think we could call it collapse by now.
I think we can now. I think prices have fallen enough.
And the third is broadly an underlying weakness in the Russian economy, which is coming out very sharply now. And so there's a collapse in the exchange rate and a lot of very dramatic things. One thing that we will bring out, however, is that the near-term impact on Russian oil production itself is likely to be relatively minor, so we will explain why that is. But with that, let me pass the mic over to Bhushan and ask you. You were present at the most recent OPEC meeting.
Yes, I was.
Give us your impressions.
Yes, and it was a strange meeting because on the surface it seemed like they weren't really doing very much. They decided not to change their production or something, but its significance was considerable. To put it in perspective, this is the first time since the 1970s that OPEC has decided it will not try to either manage, set, or influence oil prices. It is just going to let the market do it. So it's a sort of a historic moment. And we're still trying to deal with the outcome of this. What are the consequences for other producers? You mentioned Russia, but also the United States is a very big producer in the same category as Russia and Saudi Arabia. So we are in the midst of quite a momentous year right now. And I think that's something which will come out when we meet in April in Houston at CERAWeek.
That's the extraordinary thing, isn't it? What has traditionally been an oil market with two major leaders, suddenly there are three major leaders as the United States comes back onto the scene.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The whole phenomenon of shale oil, or more broadly unconventional oil, has been, of course, the big development. It certainly took the Russians by surprise. So one of the big questions, and we'll be talking about this in Houston as well, is how are the Russians responding to the unconventional oil revolution? Will they be able to do the same thing?
Yes, well, that is a question. And there is shale oil in other countries as well. But at this point in time, there's just so much oil going around and so little demand for it that I think we're seeing a whole rearrangement of priorities of the industry.
But it's relatively high-cost oil, isn't it, compared to the Saudi, certainly, and even the Russian, which is not high-cost oil broadly.
No, Saudi oil is somewhere $5 to $10 a barrel. That would be their cost. But shale oil is more than that, but somewhat less than people had thought. At one point, it was at $90, $80. We're down to below 50, and there's still lots of shale oil which seems to be competitive with that. And we're beginning to find out just where these levels are now.
Were the Russians present at the OPEC meeting, or is that confidential?
No, not at the OPEC meeting, but 2 days before the OPEC meeting in Vienna. The Russians were there along with the Mexicans, who are also not OPEC members, and Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. And Venezuela is one of the original founders of OPEC, and they arranged this meeting because their economy is in very precarious condition, and they're very
Indeed.
hard hit by lower prices for oil. And that meeting came to nothing. The idea was, could there be international cooperation to support the market? And the Russians said their industry didn't allow them to reduce volumes because of the nature of their fields.
That's very significant in itself, because on past occasions the Russians have sometimes expressed solidarity with OPEC. They've even gone so far as to say, we will reduce production. They don't quite get around to it, but at least in words it's there. This time they're not even saying that they're going to be reducing production deliberately. They're flat out.
Yes, that's right. And I think the Saudi oil minister, who was of course the most influential in OPEC, came out of that meeting and said later on that after the Russians had said they can't do this, he just simply said thank you, and that was that. And yes, you're right. In previous occasions they have said they will cut back, but those cuts never materialized.
Well, these are some of the things that we'll be talking about, Bhushan and I and the rest of the IHS Energy CERAWeek team in Houston, just 4 months away now.
Yes.
And of course, if we can be sure of anything, and it's that 4 months from now, everything will be different.
Yeah,
or will it be?
Absolutely.